Hello everybody, welcome back to the Garage Bowling Alley. Rob here, and I want to talk to you today about blackouts. I'm no trained professional, so don't listen to me, don't do what I do, you might get hurt. Always remember, follow all safety precautions on the pin setter. Help save the free fall pin setter. Cut those strings today. What is a blackout? Well, if you're bowling and all of a sudden your pin setter just turns off, don't know why it's off, first thing you want to go back and check. There's two safety switches on the pin setter. One is the turret jam blackout switch. You have pins on top of the deck, and the deck comes up and lifts the turret up. The frame's aluminum, it'll break. So it's made to swivel a little bit, but if you lift that turret, there's a switch in the back that it pivots off of, turns the machine off. So you want to clear out the pins out of the deck itself, crank it back down, clear everything out. Second, which is the most common, 99 times out of 100, you got a deck jam. Go to the back of the machine, look above the ball track, right next to the oil pan. You got a tube about 10 inches long, it's got a slot in it, there's a pin at the very top. You'll see a spring in it, X pin should be at the very, very top. If it's down at all, machine is going to turn off. There's a switch on the back side of that. You never, ever, 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 I'm going to say this enough times, never, ever, 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 no crowbars, no 2x4s, no sawzalls to clear blackouts. And never open up your electrical box cover and try to override the start contact relay to get the machine cycling. You're just going to break something. Try to explain that to the boss man or the owner when you break a moving deck or a turret because you overrode the safety switch because you didn't know to back the machine up to clear that blackout. First thing foremost, you need to unplug that electrical box. Turn out the breaker, unplug the electrical box. You do not want the pin setter coming on. Just ask the cake boss. If you hadn't read about that, Google it. Let's get into the pin setter and I'll show you these blackout switches a little bit closer and explain to you how they actually work. Okay, let's take a look at the turret blackout switch. Right down here under the cross conveyor is located right here. This is the one that if the turret jams, it'll actually pivot on here and it'll come off that switch right there. See that bolt that's up against it? Also another one, if you ever have your machine flickering sometimes while it's running, you might check that bolt right there and make sure it's sitting on that switch good, because sometimes if it's just barely making contact, your pin setter might flicker during a cycle. But I had to take the boot off my switch because the boot had gotten so hard over the years. This is a 60-some-odd-year-old pin setter that the boot was actually not letting the switch function properly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up the turret and show you that the switch works whenever you lift the turret. Pin setter shuts off. Lower it back down. Pin setter comes back on. That's the way to test your turret blackout switch. Okay, I'm going to simulate a blackout here. I am purposely causing a double 7-pin right here. When I cycle the machine, it should go down and cause a deck jam when the machine comes back up, and you'll notice when it gets to the position it's at now, it's going to black out and should shut off, because anytime anything interferes with the shifting of the deck, it's going to cut the pin setter off out of safety. Let's go and turn it on now and see what happens. We should get a deck jam right there. The blackout switch just came off the spring cable in the back. I'll show you that real quick. This is the blackout switch on the back of the pin setter, located right next to the oil pan. You notice that little X pin is all the way at the top, but I'm going to go and turn the machine on now and it's going to black out. I'm going to watch this here. I'm going to watch that cable pull down. See that pull down like that? That came off the switch, turns the pin setter off. So anytime your machine won't come on, check that right there, and chances are that pin's pulled down, which is off the switch. Machine will not run until you clear the jam. All right, here's our deck jam blackout right there. You see how that 7-pin is caught up in there inside that moving deck? And right now the deck's trying to shift forward. It wasn't able to, so it pulled on that cable in the back and shut the machine off like it should. You want to make sure that switch is working or you will break a spotting finger, or even worse, you're going to break your moving deck. But now we have a blackout situation, and the way to fix that is you need to get on top of the machine, trip the clutch, but first things first, you got to unplug that electrical box before you touch it, because if you start cranking this back and you start clearing that blackout, the machine will come back on. So first things first, you got to pull that plug, turn off the breaker, kill power to this pin setter. Then we're going to crank it backwards and clear this blackout. Let me show you how to do that. All right, first steps on clearing the blackout. First thing first, we want to pull the plug on the pin setter. You will lose fingers if you don't do that. You start clearing the blackout and it turns back on. So the first step here, now that we are unplugged, I'm going to reset the machine here and engage the clutch, which is going to bring that loose. And now I'm going to crank it with the main gearbox drive belt going toward the 7-pin. And as I do that, the machine's going to start going backward. Also, I need to hold this deck holding hook up here so that way the deck can get down. Otherwise it's going to hold and stop. But if you notice, as I crank it, it's slowly going back down, reversing what got us in this. Now the deck holding hook is clear. I can let go of it once it gets down so far. If you notice right here, is past that. But as I run the belt backwards, see the pins are starting to fall out. The deck is shifting backwards, releasing pressure. Now I can reach in down here, grab the pin out that got wedged, and the other one fell out. So now, hands off everything. The machine's going to come back on. Turn your rear switch off so the pin setter is off. Put your plug back in. I'm going to turn the rear switch back on. The machine will run now. And there we go. That's the way to clear a blackout on a Brunswick pin setter when you get a deck jam. So even if everything looks normal and you look at that little spring tube back there just to the right of the oil pan and it's down just a hair, what you want to do is move and get every pin out of the deck. You know, the ones in the turret are okay, but look in the deck. If you got 10 and they all look normal, get each one and move all 10. Just kind of flick them, kind of move them a little bit. The deck maybe just barely trying to shift, and just one pin just barely got it tweaked. So if you move all 10 pins, then that'll free up that little bit there. It'll spring back into place. The machine's going to come on. But first thing first and foremost, unplug that pin setter. Turn off the breaker, unplug that electrical box. But you don't ever want to work on a machine if it's blacked out without pulling the power on that pin setter first. Another thing to check for if you have a blackout and you got all the pins out, everything looks good. One of the most common reasons is a spotting finger bolt has broken off and has fallen down and is impeding the movement of the deck. So if you happen to have a blackout, all the pins are out, and you still don't know what it is, get down there and check every spotting finger. Make sure you have both bolts in there and one of them hadn't broken and fallen down, because that's another very common thing that happens. Well, hopefully you now have a better understanding how the blackout system works on the Brunswick pin setter, why you never want to override that system, and how to safely clear the blackout and get your pin setter back to running again. Also what to check to make sure you don't have anything break on you because something's not functioning properly. Check out all our other videos in the pin setter maintenance folder. Also check out the library of all of our other videos that we put together, all the other vintage bowling and live streams and everything else. Thanks for checking us out here in the Garage Bowling Alley.